The desert was never supposed to whisper his name, but that morning, it did. Before sunrise, before the wind even decided which direction to blow, the cowboy stood alone at the edge of his broken ranch fence, staring at fresh hoofprints cutting straight into the dead heart of the desert. No herd. No rider. Just one set of tracks, deep, urgent, and impossible to ignore. And they belonged to the horse no one could control. They called him Ghost. Not because he was quiet, but because every time someone tried to hold him, he vanished from their grasp like smoke. A stallion with eyes too aware, too human, and a past no one could explain. He had been captured once, years ago, brought in from the wilds beyond the southern ridge. But something in him never accepted fences, not land, not people, not even kindness. The cowboy, Jesse Callahan, knew that better than anyone. Jesse wasn't always the man standing in the dust with a storm in his chest. He used to be a respected ranger, someone who believed in laws, in order, in justice that made sense on paper. But paper didn't save his wife. Paper didn't bring back his brother, who disappeared after reporting illegal horse trading operations hidden deep in the desert corridors. After that, Jesse stopped believing in systems. But he never stopped believing in horses. Especially not this one. Because Ghost had been there the night everything fell apart. That was the part Jesse never told anyone. The wind shifted again, dragging sand across the broken fence line. The hoofprints were already fading, as if the desert itself wanted to erase what had happened. But Jesse didn't need them to stay visible. He knew that path. He had seen it before, in dreams that felt too real, and in memories he wished were false. "Why now?" he muttered, tightening his gloves. His voice cracked, not from fear, but from recognition. Something had triggered the horse. Something had called him back into the desert. Behind him, a voice broke the silence. "You're not seriously going after him alone." It was Marla Reyes, the only stable caretaker still working the ranch. Her presence was steady, grounding, but her eyes were already worried. She had seen Ghost's strength firsthand. She had seen men thrown like rag dolls, fences shattered like paper. And she had seen Jess's obsession grow every time the horse ran. "I don't have a choice," Jesse said without turning. Marla stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You said that last time. And the time before that. Jesse, that horse isn't just running. He's escaping something." "That's exactly why I'm going." A pause. The wind filled it. Then Marla said the word she didn't want to believe. "Or he's leading you into it." That landed heavier than either of them expected. Jesse finally turned toward her. His eyes weren't just tired, they were haunted. If Ghost wanted to disappear, he would have done it years ago. But he keeps coming back near this land. "Near me. That isn't random." Marla hesitated, then handed him a worn leather satchel. "At least take supplies. Water. Rope. And," she paused, almost reluctantly, "and this." Inside was an old tracking compass, scratched and faded. "It belonged to your brother," she added quietly. That was the moment something in Jess's expression cracked, but only slightly. He took the compass without a word, slipping it into his pocket like a memory he wasn't ready to face. Then he mounted his horse. A second stallion, calmer, older, trained for endurance, not chaos. But even that horse hesitated before stepping onto the sand. As if it knew what waited ahead. The desert swallowed sound quickly. Within minutes, the ranch disappeared behind them, replaced by endless dunes and broken rock formations that looked like the bones of the earth itself. The hoofprints of Ghost were still visible here, sharp, deep, almost violent in their direction. He wasn't wandering. He was going somewhere with purpose. Jesse leaned forward in the saddle. "What are you running from?" he whispered, though no one answered. The wind answered instead. It shifted suddenly, unnatural, sharp. And for a moment, Jesse swore he heard something beneath it. A distant echo. A horse's cry. But not a normal one. It carried weight, like warning. His horse beneath him slowed, uneasy. Sand stirred violently ahead, forming small spirals as if the desert itself was disturbed. Then Jesse saw it. A second set of tracks. Fresh. Intersecting Ghost's path. And beside them, Boot prints. Human. He froze. That wasn't part of the plan. Ghost wasn't alone out here. Someone else had entered the desert at the same time. And they were moving with him. Jesse's grip tightened on the reins. His chest tightened with something sharper than fear. Because there was only one group he knew reckless enough to follow a wild stallion into this territory. And none of them ever came back whole. The compass in his pocket suddenly felt heavier. The needle spun wildly. Then stopped. Pointing forward. Deeper into the desert. Deeper into whatever truth Ghost was running toward. Jesse exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing into the horizon where heat shimmered like a mirage. "All right," he said under his breath. "Let's see what you're trying to show me." And with that, he pushed forward, unaware that every step into the sand was pulling him further away from everything he believed about justice, and closer to something that would rewrite it completely. Far ahead, unseen in the heat distortion, a shadow moved between the dunes. Watching. Waiting. And following the horse just as closely as Jesse was. The deeper Jesse rode into the desert, the more it felt like reality itself was starting to bend. The wind no longer behaved naturally. It shifted in sudden bursts, as if reacting to something unseen moving ahead of him. The sun burned overhead, but its light felt muted, filtered through a haze of dust that never fully settled. Even his horse, trained for harsh terrain, was beginning to show signs of unease. Ears pinned back. Breathing heavier than it should be. And still, Ghost's trail never stopped. It didn't scatter. It didn't fade. It commanded direction. Jesse checked the compass again. The needle still pointed forward, but now it trembled slightly, as if unsure of the world it was navigating. That unsettled him more than anything. Compasses didn't hesitate. Machines didn't fear. But something out here did. And then he saw it. Another break in the landscape, a narrow canyon splitting the dunes like a wound in the earth. Ghost's tracks led straight into it without hesitation. The human footprints followed just behind them, but now they were sharper, more urgent, as if whoever was following had begun to run. Jesse slowed his horse at the canyon's edge. The air changed immediately. Cooler. Denser. Wrong. This wasn't just geography anymore. It felt like entering a memory that didn't belong to him. From somewhere deep inside the canyon, a faint sound echoed upward. Hooves striking rock. Then silence. Jesse dismounted slowly. His boots hit the sand with a soft crunch that felt too loud in the stillness. He tied his horse to a weathered stone and stepped forward alone, his hand resting near the revolver on his belt, not out of confidence, but habit. Every step into the canyon swallowed light. Walls rose on both sides, carved by time and storms, narrowing the sky into a thin strip of pale blue above. The hoofprints became clearer here, pressed into hard stone instead of sand. Ghost had slowed down. Or had been forced to. That thought tightened Jess's chest. Then he saw it, scratches on the canyon wall. Deep gouges, as if something massive had been dragged or fought here. And beneath them, markings. Not natural. Not random. Symbols. Old, uneven, almost desperate. Jesse crouched beside them, brushing dust away with his fingers. His breath slowed. "These aren't from an animal," he murmured. Behind him, a voice suddenly shattered the silence. "You shouldn't be here." Jesse spun instantly, hand on his weapon, but stopped when he saw who it was. A man stood a few yards away, half hidden in shadow. Dust-covered clothes. Burned edges of a ranger coat. A tired face that looked like it had survived too many days without rest. But it was his eyes that stopped Jesse cold. Because they weren't surprised to see him. They were waiting for him. "Who are you?" Jesse asked cautiously. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked past Jesse, at the canyon, at the hoofprints, at the path Ghost had taken. Then he said quietly, "You're following the wrong question." Jesse narrowed his eyes. "I'm following my horse." A faint, humorless smile crossed the man's face. "No, you're following what your horse remembers." That line didn't make sense. Not at first. But something about the way it was said made Jess's stomach tighten. The man stepped forward slightly, revealing more of himself. A worn badge was pinned to his belt, half-scratched, almost unrecognizable. Former ranger. Same system Jesse had once served under. Name's Rowan Hale, he said. And I've been tracking Ghost longer than you have. Jesse's posture hardened. That horse doesn't belong to anyone. Rowan nodded slowly. That's the only thing you've said so far that's true. A long silence stretched between them. Then Rowan gestured toward the canyon. You know what's inside there. Jesse didn't answer. Because the truth was, he didn't. Rowan's voice lowered. A trail of disappearances. Rangers. Traders. Even civilians. All tied to one corridor in this desert. All tied to one thing that never leaves evidence behind. He paused. Except horses. Jesse felt the words land like weight in his chest. Rowan continued. Ghost isn't just running. He's leading us to where it happened. Again. Jesse shook his head slightly. That's impossible. Is it? Rowan asked sharply. Because every time that horse escapes, he ends up here. And every time someone follows him, they find something they were never supposed to see. A gust of wind funneled through the canyon, carrying a low, distant sound. A horse's cry again. Closer this time. Jesse turned instinctively toward it. Rowan grabbed his arm. If you go deeper, you don't come back the same. Jesse pulled free. Then don't come with me. But Rowan didn't move. Instead, he said something quieter, heavier. I already lost my partner in there. That stopped Jesse. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not fear, but recognition. Because loss was a language he understood too well. The canyon wind rose again, stronger now, almost pulling them forward. Ghost's tracks were still there. Waiting. Jesse exhaled slowly, then stepped forward. Rowan followed without another word. Together, they moved into the narrowing darkness of the canyon, unaware that above them, at the canyon ridge, another figure crouched silently watching their descent. And that figure was not alone. Somewhere deeper ahead. Ghost was running not from them, but toward something waiting to be awakened. The canyon didn't get darker, it got quieter, which was worse. Every sound Jesse made felt absorbed before it could fully exist. Even footsteps seemed to lose confidence here, as if the ground itself was unsure whether it should allow them passage. Rowan walked ahead now, no longer speaking, only scanning the walls like a man reading a story he wished he had never learned to read. Ghost's tracks continued deeper, but something about them had changed. They were no longer just hoofprints. They were patterns. Repetitive arcs. Sudden stops. Sharp pivots. As if the horse had circled the same invisible point more than once before moving on. Jesse felt it before he understood it. Something happened here, he said quietly. Rowan didn't look back. Something still is. The canyon widened slightly, opening into a collapsed chamber carved naturally into the rock. Light filtered in from cracks above, cutting through dust in thin golden beams. And there, in the center, the tracks stopped completely. Ghost had been here. But he hadn't left in a straight line. He had paused. Jesse stepped forward carefully, scanning the ground. Then he saw it. Burn marks. Old, deep, scorched into the stone like something had been dragged across it while burning from the inside out. And among the ashes, faint impressions of more hooves. Many more. Not just Ghost. A herd. Jesse's breath slowed. This wasn't one horse. Rowan finally turned. His face looked heavier than before. No, it wasn't. The wind shifted through the chamber, and suddenly the dust in the air began to swirl unnaturally, forming shapes that weren't quite there. Jesse blinked, and for a moment, just a moment, he saw movement where there was none. Shadows of horses. Running. Not in panic, but in rhythm. As if they were following something unseen. Jesse stepped back instinctively. What is this place? Rowan looked at the chamber floor like it might answer him. Old trading route. Abandoned after the disappearances started. Official reports said sandstorms buried it. But that's not what happened. He pointed at the scorch marks. They tried to hide it. Jesse swallowed. Who? Rowan hesitated. Then quietly, People who controlled what the desert remembers. A chill passed through Jesse despite the heat. He looked again at the ground, at Ghost's prints circling the center. So why bring him here? Rowan's voice dropped. Because he already remembers it. Before Jesse could respond, a sudden sound cut through the chamber. Hooves. But not echoing. Close. From somewhere deeper in the chamber, beyond the broken stone archway, movement surged. Dust rose violently. And then, like a breach in reality itself, Ghost appeared. But he wasn't alone. The stallion burst into view with raw force, muscles tight, eyes wide with something between fear and recognition. His coat was dusted in sand and ash, but what froze Jesse wasn't his appearance. It was what followed him. More horses. At least 6, no, maybe more, emerging from the shadows of collapsed tunnels like they had been waiting beneath the earth. Wild. Silent. Moving as one fractured memory of a herd that should not exist. Jesse stepped forward instinctively. Ghost. But the horse didn't look at him. Not immediately. Ghost stood in the center of the chamber, chest rising and falling hard, as if he had just outrun something that was still chasing him, but not physically. Emotionally. Mentally. Then, slowly, his eyes locked onto Jesse. And something in that gaze shattered Jesse's understanding of everything. Because it wasn't fear. It was warning. Rowan whispered behind him, "Don't move." But it was too late. The ground beneath them trembled slightly, not from an earthquake, but from something deeper underground shifting, awakening. Ghost took one step forward. Then another. And for the first time since Jesse had known him, the horse did something he had never done before. He lowered his head. Not in surrender, but in remembrance. And in that moment, Jesse saw it, not physically, not fully, but like a memory forced into his mind. A convoy. Hidden wagons in the desert. Men. Rangers. His brother among them. And horses, being taken. Not lost. Taken. The vision snapped back violently, leaving Jesse gasping. Rowan grabbed his shoulder. "You saw it too, didn't you?" Jesse couldn't answer. Because the truth was starting to form, something he had refused to consider. Ghost wasn't just running through the desert. He was returning to the site of something buried. Something that involved corruption, cover-ups, and a truth that had been erased from official justice. A sound echoed again. Closer. Not horse this time. Metal. Boots. More people were entering the chamber from above. And Ghost reacted instantly, head snapping up, body tense, heard shifting behind him like a single nervous heartbeat. Rowan's face tightened. They found us. Jesse looked up toward the broken light above the chamber. Silhouettes stood at the edge. Armed. Watching. Not rescue. Not coincidence. Containment. And suddenly, everything clicked into place in Jesse's mind with horrifying clarity. Ghost wasn't leading him to justice. He was leading him to the place where justice had already been broken and buried. And now, someone had come to make sure it stayed that way. Ghost let out a low, shaking breath. The herd responded. And the chamber filled with the sound of hooves preparing for either escape or war. The moment the armed silhouettes appeared above the chamber, everything inside it changed shape, not physically, but emotionally, like the air itself had decided to become hostile. Jesse didn't move at first. Neither did Rowan. Even the horses held still, as if the entire herd understood that sudden movements could rewrite what happened next in ways none of them could undo. Ghost stood at the center, head slightly lowered, but his body was no longer relaxed. It was coiled, alert, like a storm trapped inside skin. Above them, voices echoed down through the broken stone. Contain the herd. Do not let them scatter. That wasn't a rescue command. It was an order. Jess's jaw tightened. They're not here for horses. Rowan finished it under his breath. They're here to erase what the horses brought back. Ghost shifted again, stepping between Jesse and the herd behind him. It was subtle, but deliberate. Protective. And in that moment, Jesse realized something that hit harder than fear. Ghost wasn't just leading. He was guarding. A sharp metallic sound rang out above, someone loading a weapon. The herd behind Ghost stirred instantly, tension rippling through them like a shared heartbeat. One wrong move and the chamber would explode into chaos. Rowan leaned closer to Jesse. If they panic them, we lose control. And if we lose control down here, he didn't finish the sentence. Jesse already knew. The chamber would become a stampede trap. Ghost suddenly lifted his head, nostrils flaring. He looked toward the far side of the chamber, the deepest shadowed passage they hadn't explored yet. Then back at Jesse. Then at Rowan. It wasn't random. It was communication. Jesse whispered, "He's trying to tell us something." Rowan frowned. "Or trying to get us killed faster." But Ghost didn't wait for permission. He moved. Not forward toward the men above, but sideways, toward the dark tunnel carved into the rock. The herd followed immediately, like they had rehearsed this movement in a memory no human could access. Hooves struck stone in synchronized urgency. Above them, panic crept into the voices. "They're breaking formation, move in." That was the trigger. A loud crack echoed, gunfire fired into the chamber ceiling, dust exploding like a collapsing sky. The herd jolted. One of the horses reared in fear, and suddenly control began to fracture. Jesse reacted instantly. "No, don't shoot again." But it was already too late. Another shot fired. This one ricocheted off stone. The herd broke. Not in full chaos, but in a dangerous surge of fear. Horses pushed toward exits, slipping between shadows, the chamber suddenly alive with pounding hooves and collapsing dust. Ghost stopped. Just for a second. And looked back at Jesse. That look wasn't fear anymore. It was decision. Then Ghost turned and ran into the tunnel. And the herd followed. Rowan grabbed Jesse's arm. "If we don't move now, we get buried in here with them." But Jesse wasn't listening. Something had snapped into place inside him, something that had been forming since the moment he followed those hoofprints into the desert. Because Ghost wasn't escaping. He was leading them deeper on purpose. Jesse broke free and ran after him. Rowan cursed under his breath and followed. The tunnel swallowed them instantly. Sound became warped. Light fractured into thin lines behind them. The herd's hooves echoed ahead like thunder trapped underground. And Ghost was at the front, navigating the darkness like he knew every turn. As they ran, Jess's mind flickered again. Brief, violent flashes he couldn't control. Men leading horses through this same tunnel. Chains. Hidden gates. A symbol burned into wood crates. And his brother's voice, distant, urgent, warning him about what the desert is used for when no one is watching. Jesse stumbled slightly but kept moving. Rowan caught up beside him, breathing hard. This isn't a natural cave system. This was built. Jesse nodded without looking. A route. For what? Rowan asked. Jesse didn't answer immediately. Because the answer was forming too clearly. Then he said it anyway. For disappearing things. The tunnel widened abruptly into another chamber. Larger, older, carved with unnatural precision. And there, in the center, Ghost stopped again. The herd slowed behind him. Jesse stepped into the chamber and froze. Because it wasn't empty. It contained remnants. Broken wooden structures. Rusted chains anchored into stone. Old wagon wheels half buried in dust. And along the walls, faded markings identical to those in the first chamber, but more organized. Structured. Systematic. This wasn't just hiding. This was storage. Rowan's voice dropped. This is it. Jesse stared at the chains. What happened here? Ghost moved slowly toward one of the stone walls and pressed his nose against it. The herd grew quiet behind him, as if waiting for something to happen. Then it did. A low mechanical sound echoed somewhere deep in the structure. And a section of the wall, barely visible before, shifted slightly. A hidden mechanism. Rowan stepped forward cautiously. Don't touch anything. But Ghost already had. The moment his hoof stepped near a carved symbol on the floor, something clicked underground. And the entire chamber responded. Dust fell from above in a sudden cascade. Old mechanisms awakened after years, maybe decades, of silence. And then, from deep within the stone walls, a faint sound emerged. Not wind. Not animals. Voices. Recorded. Distorted. Evidence. Jesse's heart pounded as he realized what they had walked into. This wasn't just a hiding place. It was a vault. A buried archive of everything that had been erased. And Ghost, somehow, had always known it existed. Above them, the distant sound of pursuit echoed through the tunnel. The armed men were getting closer. Rowan looked at Jesse. "We don't have much time." Jesse looked at Ghost. And for the first time, he understood the full weight of it. The horse hadn't been running from justice. He had been carrying it back. And now, it was about to be seen. The chamber trembled again. The vault was opening. And whatever had been buried in the desert was finally waking up. The vault doors didn't open like a normal structure breaking after years of silence. They opened like something remembering it had been forced to forget. A deep grinding echoed through the chamber as the hidden stone panels shifted apart, releasing a wave of dust so thick it felt like time itself collapsing. Jesse stepped back instinctively, shielding his face, while Rowan raised an arm to protect his eyes. The herd of horses pressed closer behind Ghost, uneasy but unbroken, their presence filling the chamber with a living tension that contrasted sharply with the dead weight of what had been buried there. And then, it was revealed. Rows of old storage compartments carved into the rock. Rusted filing crates sealed with iron. Symbols etched into stone that matched the canyon markings outside. But here, they were deliberate, organized, repeated. This wasn't random corruption. It was a system. Jesse's breath caught as he stepped forward. This isn't just history. Rowan's voice was quiet now, almost hollow. It's evidence. Ghost stood at the center of it all, perfectly still, as if he had finally arrived at the place he had been carrying inside him all along. He turned his head slowly, looking at Jesse, not with fear, not with urgency, but with something deeper. Completion. Then the chamber's far wall flickered. A hidden projection system, old but preserved underground, activated with a low hum. Light spilled across the stone, forming distorted images at first, then sharpening into something devastatingly clear. Footage. Convoys moving through the desert. Horses being loaded into hidden routes. Men in ranger uniforms, official insignia visible, overseeing transfers that were never recorded in any public system. And among them, Jesse saw him. His brother. Alive in the footage. Standing beside a sealed wagon, arguing, resisting. Then the image shifted violently. A struggle. A horse breaking free. Gunfire. Silence. Jesse stumbled back as if struck. No, that's not. Rowan grabbed his arm, steadying him. This is why Ghost kept coming back. He wasn't lost, Jesse. He was remembering. Ghost stepped forward toward the projection, lowering his head as the images played. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. The herd behind him began to react. Not in panic, but in recognition. As if they too were part of the memory being shown. Because they were. The desert hadn't forgotten. It had been forced to wait. Above them, heavy footsteps echoed closer through the tunnel. The armed men were nearly inside the chamber now, their voices sharper, more urgent. Secure the vault before it fully activates. Rowan's expression hardened. They're not trying to stop us. They're trying to stop the record from existing. Jesse slowly straightened, something shifting inside him. Pain transforming into clarity. Then they're too late. Ghost suddenly let out a low, resonant sound, not a cry of fear, but something deeper. A call. The herd responded instantly. Hooves struck stone in unified motion. And then Jesse understood. This wasn't just exposure. It was awakening. The horses weren't just witnesses, they were carriers of memory, survivors of a system that had tried to erase them. Ghost had been leading them back here not to escape the desert, but to give the truth a place to exist again. The vault's final section opened. Inside, sealed records, marked logs, names, routes, transactions that tied everything together. Illegal horse trafficking, corruption networks, disappearances disguised as storms. And then Jesse saw it. A final ledger entry. Signed the same night his brother vanished. The chamber shook as footsteps above entered the outer tunnel. Rowan looked at Jesse. We don't have time to process this. We either take it, or they bury it again. Jesse looked at Ghost. The stallion stood between the herd and the vault, as if guarding both truth and consequence. Slowly, Jesse walked forward and placed his hand on Ghost's neck. The horse didn't flinch. Didn't resist. Just accepted. I understand now, Jesse whispered, voice breaking. You weren't lost. Ghost exhaled softly, and for the first time, leaned into him. A bond not built in comfort, but in shared burden. Jesse turned toward Rowan. Help me get everything out. Rowan nodded once. Together, they began pulling records, activating old storage systems, copying evidence onto portable drives, moving faster as the sound of approaching boots grew louder. Above them, the men finally entered the chamber opening. Flashlights cut through dust. Voices shouted commands. But when they saw what was unfolding below, the vault open, the herd gathered, the projection still burning the truth into stonelight, their confidence fractured. Because justice, once buried, was no longer silent. It was standing in front of them. Ghost stepped forward one final time, lifting his head toward the opening above. The herd followed. And for a moment that felt larger than time itself, the desert held its breath. Then Jesse spoke, not loudly, but firmly. Everything you buried is coming back with us. The wind outside surged through the canyon like a response. And as the first official reports would later describe it, though none of them could fully explain it, a herd of wild horses emerged from the desert that night, moving as if guided by something unseen, carrying with them the end of a buried system and the beginning of justice returning to the surface. Ghost ran at the front. Not as a fugitive, but as a witness that could no longer be silenced. And Jesse followed, not as a man chasing a horse, but as someone finally learning where truth had been hiding all along.